but I want to welcome you to this evening's webinar. The Waypoint 55 is this is our 4th anniversary, 48 sessions we've had in the last 4 years where we're trying to tackle ministry-related topics in 55 minutes or less. And so we want to thank you for joining us tonight. And I also initially just want to say thank you, as we always do, to give props to our webinar platform sponsor, which is Mid-Atlantic Christian University, which also serves churches here in our region and around the country. And they've been our sponsor since we began 4 years ago. And so we want to thank them for that and for all the great partners that we have around the region that were trained on their campus. And so, big props to MacU. And Waypoint exists. Not only do we start churches, although we've started more than 80 churches since we were founded in 1938, but we exist to help establish churches to get on mission and stay on mission is the byline that we like to use. And tonight's topic is related to that, specifically related to your missions emphasis or your missions impact at your church is to help your missions team to get on mission or stay on mission. And so I'm glad that we're going to dive into that topic here in just a minute. So if missions is your area of interest or your area of service at your church, we'd love for you to watch out specifically for the 2 missions webinars where we bring on really qualified leaders in this area from a number of different angles to help equip church mission teams to do the best job that they can, to be the best steward of that emphasis at your church. So I'm going to, in just a second, get us rolling with Dave Stewart, our presenter. But I do want to let you in particular know about the Waypoint 55 YouTube page, that we have a YouTube channel, and all 48 of our sessions over the last 4 years are posted in playlists. If you see right here, there's a playlist. And so the ones that are missions related are all in a folder, and the ones that are for elders are all in a folder. The ones that are for safety and security teams, all in a folder, prayer teams, and the like. And so if you would like to see any of the former webinars that we've done on missions related topic, you just click playlists, click the one for missions, and you'll see this might be the 8th one that we've done in 4 years that would help equip you and your team to do the best job that they can with your missions program at your church. And so with that being said, and we'd love for you to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And when you do that, you will get a notification the next time a webinar gets posted to our page. And you can decide whether you'd want to watch it, but you'll receive a little notification if you subscribe to our YouTube channel. So that being said, our topic tonight is about developing your church's mission strategy. And so we've invited a guest on that. One of my staff, when we were talking about upcoming webinars, I asked who would do a great job on this particular topic, that knowing that our missions related topic was coming up for the spring. And a fellow on my staff said, I heard a fellow several years ago do the best job he's ever heard on this topic. Let's see if we can get him. And sure enough, Dave was available. And so we are glad that he's going to jump in and really kind of share his whole perspective on creating a strategic plan for what you're doing with your missions emphasis, your missions impact at your church. Dave, I can remember your name, and I'm sure you get this all the time, or used to at least, because of the Major League Baseball pitcher. I don't know if he's in the Hall of Fame yet, but was in the 90s the most intimidating pitcher in baseball. His nickname was Smoke, and so with the Oakland A's, you look nothing like him, not even a brother. If people know baseball, but I remember your name because of Dave Stewart, the great baseball pitcher.
Hey, it was either him or the lead singer for the Eurythmics. Okay, it was Dave Stewart.
There you go, either one. And so you have a name to live up to. But why don't you go ahead and just jump right in and kind of give us your background about how you got into where you're at, and then how that influences what you're leading there at Compassion Church in Savannah.
Yeah.
And so I'm just going to jump right in there. Remind folks that if and when they have a question, just type it right in so that we can see it in the queue and know if we're able to address it immediately during the session. All right, Dave, go ahead.
Yeah, well, thanks, Tim. I really appreciate it. It's good to be with everybody tonight. And, I'm just excited about this. Obviously, this is my favorite topic. So I had to write a lot of notes down because I said, if I don't write all these notes down, we're going to be here for 4 hours, and I'm sure I'll be the only one there at the end. So I really enjoy talking about this and just strategizing through the whole thing. So a little bit about my background. I don't have the typical pastor's background, I guess you would say. Um, my career at Compassion Christian Church started in a very indirect way. I tell people a lot, if you want to know my story, you just go to Luke 15, kind of scroll down to about verse 11, and there's my story right there. I was raised in the church. I was confirmed in a Lutheran church when I was younger, and then as soon as I was old enough, man, I ran. I got as far away as I could. Spent a few years in the wilderness. Got married, had kids, began a successful management career, and a little later on, actually didn't come back to the church until I was 39 years old. Okay. I could tell you a long story there, but I had a friend who was actually an elder at Compassion, which was then Savannah Christian Church. And he and I coached baseball together, youth baseball. And I am not exaggerating when I tell you he invited me at least 50 times to come to church, to his church with him. And I had a reason every single time why the answer was no. And then finally, through a series of events, we decided to come, and man, we just encountered the Holy Spirit in that place, and it was amazing. And so the first thing I tell everybody is, if you're praying for somebody and you're inviting and you're getting stiff armed, don't give up. Okay, do not give up.
There you go. That's worth the price of admission right there. Yeah, there you go. Keep inviting. When the time's right, they'll come.
That's right. And in a lot of ways, as you were here, as we get going here, a lot of that background has kind of formed my filter on what's effective and what's not, what attracts people nowadays, and and just the ways to connect people with the gospel. But so we came to the church. My wife and I were baptized together. About 3 months later, I was on my first short-term mission trip. And again, just an encouragement to everybody here. I say that I was recruited on this mission trip, kind of strong-armed, basically. It was like the missions pastor looked me in the face and said, "I think you should go to Haiti with us." And I was like, "What?" I had to go home and look on the map, see where Haiti was, and kind of figure that part out. But it wasn't like, "Oh, here it is. Let me try to talk you into it." It wasn't like that. It was just like, "You should do this." Well, I did, and I went on that trip, and it changed my world. Just changed everything about this American mindset, everything that I had been born and raised up in, that all of us, for the most part, have, I guess. And like, hey, go out there and lean your ladder against a building and try to climb that corporate ladder and be successful and have a wife and 2.3 kids and a dog and a minivan, and everything was going good until I got to see the world a little bit as God sees it every day. And it really did change my world in so many ways. And so from there, I did like I do with everything else. I just dove in, and I joined the missions committee right off the bat. About a year later, I was the chairman of the missions committee. I became a deacon in the church, and was diving into this thing. Well, at that point in my career at UPS, I was offered a position out in Colorado. I moved my family out to Colorado. We had to leave our home church, and it was a tough time out there. But while I was out there, I was just working on a plan. What's this going to look like? I believe, God, you're calling me to missions. I'm going to do this. I had, about the time I had the whole plan figured out, is when God revealed his plan to me a little bit. Anybody else experienced that? I don't know. But so our senior pastor back here at Compassion, Cam Huxford, came through town, spent the night at our home. We had a great conversation into the night. And when he got back, he called me about a week later and said, "I want you to pray about coming on our staff as our missions pastor." At the time, that position included missions and being the director over our student and college ministries. It was kind of a time of growth for the church. And They realized that these student college pastors were full of enthusiasm, but not so much on the strategic side or the long range planning side. And so my job was to come in, kind of oversee that and do the missions of the church. I like to say this, first of all, I tell people a lot, like nowadays when we hire pastors, we do psychological evaluations and we do background checks. We do a lot of filtering. I knew that God wanted me in this position because we didn't do any of that for me. Okay. So I didn't have to go through the background check or any of the things that might have disqualified me back then. But anyway, I started in 2003. I've been here. This is my 18th year. I never looked back. Just left that career at UPS, came to the church, and have loved it. I've had bad days, but man, I've never regretted that decision, and have just loved watching what the Lord has done here. And I guess I would say it like this. I usually don't talk about numbers unless somebody asks me questions, but my perspective, just so you kind of understand, is when we first came to this church, it was about 500 people, two services. Today, and this is pre-COVID, of course, but pre-COVID, we've been running in attendance about 9,000 on 6 different campuses, 16 different services, and a huge online presence, of course, too. So what I mean by that is just I've had the blessing of seeing God do some amazing things and watch the challenges of dealing with growth and how do we do that, and if you're going to grow, what are you going to be about, and who you want to be. And about 4 or 5 years ago, we changed our name from Savannah Christian to Compassion Christian, and believe me, that was not taken lightly. There was a couple of reasons for that, but primarily we just wanted to stamp this body of believers that this is what we're going to be about. We're going to be about compassion. And Cam says it a lot. If you're going to call yourself compassion, you better be serious about it. That's the way he puts it. And so just part of a great church that's really excited about living out Proverbs 31:8, and speaking up for those who can't speak for themselves. So that's just a big part of it. And so understand this is where I'm coming from with my 18 years of experience in this stuff, and just watching some crazy things happen. A lot of the best lessons I've learned have been through mistakes. And so I'll share a little bit of that too. So
from the churches that I get to work with, I've helped several churches with their missions strategy, and I've had the good fortune of being part of, I think, 5 church mission teams. And what I just discovered is that there's never been any stated strategy as far as
right.
Kind of a plan. And so I'm really curious for you to let us know what that looks like for you, how it evolved for you, and then but really the principles that are transferable to anybody that's on the webinar tonight or that might watch it on their YouTube channel after this evening, is what can they take away to help their church do a similar job with the responsibility and that they're overseeing at the church, such a kingdom responsibility they have to steward. And so go ahead and dive right into that. I'll get to your slides here.
Yeah, and I would say that just this was important too, which is we are in Savannah, Georgia, which is not exactly the hotbed of the Christian churches of America. It wasn't like Indianapolis or something where I could just jump in the car, run over, and spend some time with somebody who'd been doing it a lot longer. When I started out, I was just trying to figure this thing out. And really, all I knew was to look and see what I saw in Scripture, and try to do this in ways that made sense. I walked into a situation, where there was a missions committee. We had monthly meetings, and I hope I don't offend anybody here, but my experience was that we had these monthly meetings. I was the missions pastor, but I would be exhausted after those meetings because I felt like I was reporting. I was like being held accountable, and I was reporting. So everything we had worked on all month, I had to pass that information on. And then there were a lot of people who had opinions, but not a lot of skin in the game. And that was a model that we had to kind of gradually change. We went through the geographical model where there were people on the missions committee that each person had a different geographical part of the world that they were responsible for overseeing. We tried it that way. We tried it a couple of different ways. But really what ended up happening in that model was I I can't describe it any better than to say it looked a lot like our U.S. Congress. It was just this group of people where everybody were advocating for a certain group and trying to, impose their will. Sometimes uh, honoring the Lord, sometimes not so much. And man, it just was not functional. It wasn't functional. And so we had to kind of re-examine all that and go through a whole metamorphosis of design and what that looked like. And so I do want to talk about that a little bit. I don't expect everybody to necessarily agree, but I will just tell you this up front as we dig into this a little bit. We have a lot of tools. We have sample missions policies. We have ours, what we use. I'll touch on some of these things, but we've got a vast number of these kind of tools that are in place now that can just help you process this as you're going through it a little bit. And, I guess I would say it like this. We can all agree that I can't tell each person on this call what their mission strategy should be, like who you should work with or where in the world you should be working, that kind of thing. But what I do hope to accomplish is just like I said, provide some practical observations, some things we've learned through experience, mainly from some mistakes we made. Sometimes you learn your best lessons that way. But also I want to share some unexpected defining moments. So, these times where we made a decision to do something and it just changed everything about the culture of the church and the heart of the church. Because again, you can have the best mission strategy in the world. If it's a piece of paper that's in a drawer somewhere and it's not really affecting lives, or you're not really creating passion among the members of the church, then it doesn't really mean much. So hopefully I can share a little bit of that in the next few minutes here a little bit. And
All right.
Yep. So I wanted to start. Let's just start with those slides that I have there, if you will, Tim. And the first one is just this. It's obviously, if you're looking to kind of decide what your strategy is going to be, you got to first really examine the heart of the church. And some of these questions that are on here are the things that you would want to ask. Like, who are we now? Is this who we want to be? Where do we want to go? We used to, one of the first things that I was involved in was just taking a look at our missions budget and looking at it on a pie chart, like where are the dollars going? And we divided it out with stateside, local, international. And then maybe we split the international out, looking at it from reached or unreached areas of the world. And we found that, man, the vast majority of our resources were staying right in the United States. And we just didn't believe that was the right thing to do. But we knew we couldn't just flip it on its head either. So we made a 5-year plan, a target percentage, goal for each of those areas. And somebody used the analogy like, turning the Queen Mary. It's not something you do on a dime. And so we had to say, okay, let's just make sure we have a plan, because there's an old adage we go with that says, everybody ends up somewhere. Some people end up somewhere on purpose. Okay. And so we made a specific plan for what we wanted those percentages to be. And we actually ended up hitting those things. And because of the growth that was happening, we didn't have to negatively affect some of the existing partnerships and things that were happening in the States. We just did all the increase in the areas where we wanted to be. So, a lot of these things are things that each church is going to have to wrestle with, of course. Okay. But I want to do this, just kind of give a warning. First of all, I wanted to say that if you're not careful, this exercise just becomes a matter of opinion or connection. Like I said, an advocacy that's already there. Sometimes it's a little bit of nepotism. Okay, we've seen this. Your objectivity can get really shaded if somebody you love is on the mission field. And so I would just say, man, what we had to do, we decided to put together like our policies and guidelines in the beginning, because like you said, Tim, nothing was on paper. It took us about 2 years of praying, fasting, retreats with a missions leadership team, some forming, storming, norming stuff, it took a while. It took a while to go through it. And it wasn't just as simple as like, okay, what's my opinion? We really wanted to go through this in detail and make sure that we got it right with what role God would have our church play. Yeah, so you can flip to that next slide, Acts 13. Most of us are familiar with Acts 13 in the beginning there, what we see happening at the church in Antioch, that under the guidance of the Holy Spirit, they sent Barnabas and Paul away to accomplish a very special work. And we know that they went where the gospel was not being preached, and they did the work that the sending church couldn't do, which was, going and proclaiming the gospel out beyond that church's reach. And we know this is a great example for us all, but the reason I wanted to show this is because as much as Paul and Barnabas were in tune with the desire of the church and the moving of the Holy Spirit there, it was fortunate, okay? And I say that because what you don't see here is what a lot of us face in the local church today. And what I mean by that is, that obscure missionary candidate that comes up out of your church, and they're going to a place, they've been doing all the work, maybe they've been there on a short-term trip, they've talked to the agency or the home missionary where they're going, and they kind of bring the local church in it towards the end. And it's like, hey, I'm going to this place, I want to go as a missionary, and I'm hoping that my church here will send me. And then now the missions team is kind of put in this awkward position of like, do we join in at this point? Do we say no? What do we do here? It's a tough place to be, and I know I've been in that spot many times. If they're going with an agency, all of a sudden you've got to stop what you're doing and understand this new organization and try to figure them out so you can partner with them. Or, this one maybe is a little more common, which is, we get requests from missionaries or ministries around the world, people in needy countries or needy places, and they're asking your church if you'll partner with them, support their efforts. I'll tell you, I used to say it like this, the first couple of years that I was on staff, missionaries would come to me and they'd want to have a meeting, and I'd say, no, we can't partner with you. And then I would just pray that they would not ask me why, because I did not have a really good answer to the why. Mm-hmm. I just knew it was busy, or it was crazy, or we got too much going on, or I'm in a bad mood today, or whatever it was, but I didn't really have a solid reason for my no. Other times, maybe it's it's what I kind of touched on earlier. It's a touchy subject, but maybe somebody, pastor, elder, somebody's got a son or daughter or someone who's they're connected by family with, and nobody's really holding them accountable, or there's some level there of unspoken issue. Those are the realities that we have to deal with so very often. And so I would say like this too. I've met a lot of church missions leaders over these years with a lot of different philosophies, and I think you touched on this early on. I can't tell somebody this is the right way to do it and this is the wrong way to do it. But I do know that some of these ways of doing it are pretty extreme, and we need to really examine that. I think I met a church once that they told me their goal was to have a pin in, they had a map in their church. They wanted to have a pin in every country of the world. Wow. And so they were sending missionaries, they were connecting with missionaries and sending them $50 a month, and their goal was to have a missionary in every country of the world. Now, again, nobody knew the names of any of these people, and nobody was really connected to any of them, but that was their goal. And then maybe on the other extreme, I had a friend who was in a church who they decided to cut all their partnerships way, way back. And they said, well, our goal is to only have 4, but the driving factor in those 4 was going to be, we want 4 places where we can send short-term teams. That was the overriding priority. Where can we send teams? And, I think somewhere in between there is something that's really good. So just got to be careful with that. This next slide, which has Acts 1:8 on it, we're all familiar with this, I know. But, we've got obviously significant clarification about the responsibilities for the local church and missions in this area. And, I heard someone say once, like in these terms, they said, Acts 1:8 is kind of describing the portfolio of the church's reach and our diversified investment to include each of these 4 areas. But the thing that happens a lot of time that I see here is, and again, remember what I said earlier about coming to the Lord at age 39. I still remember very clearly what it was like to be that cynic at age 38 and before, who was like, I understand church. I grew up in it. There's nothing there of value for me. You can't attract me with this stuff, blah, blah, blah. We've all heard it before, okay? And so I still can remember that. So a lot of the filter I have, I think sometimes comes from just challenging things. And not that I'm challenging Acts 1:8, but I am challenging the way we interpret it sometimes, which is this idea of like, okay, the majority of the church will catch the first two, Jerusalem and Judea. These crazy missions people are going to handle Samaria and the ends of the earth. You know, it's like missionary Don Richardson once said, I thought it was hilarious. He said, some people believe that God invented missions to keep the hyperactive Christians from driving the rest of us crazy. And so, you know, I think there can be a real separation in the church very often too, where if this is misinterpreted a little bit, where it's like, okay, most of us are going to do the close here stuff, and a couple of you are going to go out there and do that. That can cause some real issues in the church too, if there's just a few people focused on the areas of the world with the most need. Okay, so just bring this back for a second. If, you know, one of the things that we had to do was define outreach for our church. And we like to talk about outreach because I think missions is one of those words where most people just have a predefined stereotype. Just like when I was 35 and I was being invited to church, I had already decided in my mind what that word meant, and I decided whether it had value to me. So I feel missions works the same way in the church sometimes. Like, you know, hey, you want to be part of a missions team? You want to go on a missions trip? Well, there were people who had decided that was me or that's not me. So we decided outreach was something we had to figure out. And so as we got into it, we defined outreach as, you know, many people will come into the walls of our buildings because they're invited, but others won't. They've got something about their situation that whether we tell them they're welcome or not doesn't matter. They don't feel they're welcome. And the church has a responsibility to go to them. So that's what we wanted to do. So that's kind of what we've gone with. And we decided to go with passion. And this, I'm going to go back to the slides now, Tim. You know, I'm going to try to blast through some of this. Yeah. Okay. You know, we see pretty clearly, Jesus is pretty serious about like, hey, we need more workers, right? I mean, from the beginning, he's making this a really clear message. The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. I think, you know, after the way the disciples reacted when he was talking to the woman at the well, I think he was pretty forceful about that statement. You know, we need more people serious about going to people different than them. So I hope by this point, I really haven't said anything that any of you would disagree with. But this next slide, of course, is the one we're most familiar with, the mission circles, the Great Commission, Matthew 28. But I want you to think about this for something, because this really convicted me. I heard somebody say this to me once, and it hurt because it was true. He basically said, you know, a lot of us have been raised in the church and we've grown up and we want to be faithful to our Lord and Savior, Jesus. But we feel guilt when we miss Sunday service, or we feel guilt if we miss our life group, or we feel guilt if we don't get up in the morning and get into God's word. But how many of us feel guilt when we don't do what Jesus gave us here as almost his final command of, you know, go make disciples of all nations? Like, a lot of people are not involved in this, but have never felt the first twinge of guilt for that. There's something wrong with that situation. And that really struck me personally. I look at this and I paraphrase it kind of, you know, the New Day translation. And what I see there, it says, hey, Jesus is saying, I have the authority, so listen to me. Go make disciples, baptize them, teach them how to be disciples and to make more disciples. And by the way, if this scares you, I'll be with you all the way through this thing, right? It's pretty straightforward. So as we kind of really dug into this as a church, we landed on 4 areas of, you know, for our focus at Compassion. And these are the 4 areas that you see in this next slide. Reaching future generations, restoring dignity, multiplying disciples, and then, of course, mobilizing the church. So really, there's just like 3 things here that we're focused on. The reaching the future generations. Man, we have got to reach these kids. It's amazing. The older you get, the more you realize how fast a decade goes by. And these kids are now the leaders in the church. We also realized how important restoring dignity was. You know, the idea that as you proclaim the gospel, you can't separate the fact that we have a human condition that's pretty common to most of us, which is Most men want to provide for their families. Most families want security. Most families want, most parents want their kids to have a better life than they have. And those are the kind of things we want to be about, basically teaching a man to fish. And then, of course, I don't have to explain multiplying disciples to anybody. I mean, this is the whole purpose. Without that, there's no point in all of it. So these are the things that we landed on as a church. Okay. But we realized that strategic initiatives are not very strategic. If I always say it like this, if you ask 10 people and they can't tell you what those three things are right there, then you don't really have a strategic initiative. You need at least 7 or 8 people out of 10 to be able to tell you what it is you're doing. So that's been very valuable in our church. It doesn't really matter if our 4 or 5 leaders know those 3 things. We need our church to know those three things. Um, so this was a very important part of it for us. But here's a clarifying moment for us as a church when things kind of changed. On this next slide, when we realized that we could have that vision and we can explain, articulate those things that we want to be involved in. But what people were actually telling us was, when I can see what you're doing locally, I'll be inspired by what you're doing globally.
That's good.
And so we really tried to align those 3 things we just talked about: future generations, restored dignity, and multiplying disciples. Those are the same 3 things we're after locally. We want people to practically be able to see these things happening so that they go. And now that we've been doing it for a few years, what we found is some people start globally and come back and get involved locally. Some people start locally and head out to the nations later. Whatever it is, we don't really care as long as they're in the game. And so that has been a really big key part of, mobilizing people from the seats to the streets, as they say. So the next thing that's here, this next one, I just want to give this as food for thought. I saw this for a while back, and maybe that doesn't line up so good on the picture of my arrows, but this is just an interesting thing that I think you should all consider, which is, I saw this in a blog article, but a shifting culture in the States. The idea of back in the 50s to the 80s, this was kind of the cycle of leading somebody to Jesus. You preach the gospel to the unchurched, they accepted Jesus, they got involved in some form of community, and then they found their purpose or their cause. Think Billy Graham. He would just fill up a stadium. He would preach the simple gospel. He would make an altar call. People would come, they would get connected, and they would find their purpose. But then a little after that, starting in the 90s, we shifted, right? And we started seeing a lot of community through life groups, small groups, home groups, whatever you want to call them. And it was like this. It was unchurched started with community, where they would encounter and hopefully give their lives to Christ. And then they'd find their purpose through that. But what we're seeing now here lately, and even, this is not even counting the crazy changes that are happening through COVID. But what we've seen from 2010 on is what this author called, no longer identified as the unchurched, but now the nuns and the duns, the ones who have no interest in church, or they're done with the church. And what we're seeing is that young people, of course, are connected to the cause first. They want to be part of making a difference. They're in this isolated social media world with very few close friends that they can reach out and hug. But they have this longing to be making a difference, to be part of something that makes a difference. And we're seeing that we've got to create those opportunities in the church, get people involved in things, stop having arguments about whether social justice is a political thing or not. It's not. It was Jesus's idea, that we're out there making a difference in the communities that are underdeveloped. And then from there, people can find their community and they come to Jesus in that way. So I think part of this was, like, there's always been this linear idea of, if you can get them to Sunday service and then maybe get them into a group, and then maybe someday if they get mature enough, they get involved in missions or outreach. But we've got to create entry points at every step of that path, not just a linear line. Okay, the next one on here, and of course that just means for 2021, the church has got to be authentic, biblical, relevant, and making a difference. It's not enough to say you're not. The next slide shows, this was something really important to us. However you decide to do your strategy, valuing partnership is so key. We rarely use the word support, like supporting missions or supporting missionaries. There's just this, again, I think words have meaning, words have power. And the idea of support to me sounds like we hold you up. And without us, you can't do what you're doing. We prefer to look at it as a partnership, because in a partnership, everybody in the partnership is responsible for something. There's mutual accountability. And that's something that we strive very hard for, this idea of like, yeah, you're going to be accountable. And some of the missionaries that we've worked with have a hard time in the beginning with conversations about how do you measure success? You know, what's your 5-year plan? Uh, but they appreciate it, and it helps us. It also informs us on what it is that we can bring to that partnership that moves us towards success. Um, on the next picture, you'll see this is really our overriding motto. As far as partnership, we talk about communication leads to understanding, and understanding leads to trust. And far too often, we're not willing to invest in the communication. But we are at a place now where we have, because we've committed to this process, we have long vetted partnerships, some of them with sent missionaries, a lot of them with national leaders that are producing amazing kingdom results. Because as we say, we say this a lot, like if we achieve the trust, with trust in the Lord, we can do things beyond anything we can hope or imagine, right? So it's really good.
Dave, let me interrupt you. We've had one question that's really simple to answer now, but I want to remind people, if they have questions about what Dave's saying, to go ahead and type it into the Q&A button, hit the button and type that in so that we've got it. The question was, can they have access to your slides so that they can use them later with their team? And so with Dave's permission, we can make that available. There'll be a follow-up email that all of you receive tomorrow, 24 hours after this ends. There's an automated email that goes to you, and we'll include links to things in that that we talked about tonight, and including a link to a PDF version of this webinar slide deck here tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. I have no problem with that. And again, like I said, there's a lot that I couldn't get to in this, but I'll be happy to talk to anybody individually afterwards. This is something that was a really valuable lesson for me when it comes to that communication leading to understanding, to trust. And again, working with people from other cultures, other countries, I had to learn to be really careful about jumping to issues of character when we had disagreements. And somebody a lot smarter than me shared this with me once, but just this idea of like, in cross-cultural relationships, realize that there are 4 filters you have to work through. There's personality, which all of us have. There's language. Typically, the person you're working with is speaking in their second or maybe third language. There's culture. There's certainly differences in how cultures react and speak to each other. And so you got to kind of work through all those things before you get to the missionary having a character issue. And I just caution people with this a lot, because some of us feel like we have the gift of sizing people up. And I've learned that I've got to be much more patient and go through these other filters before I get to something where it's like, oh, we just can't work with this person because of whatever reason. So some of the strongest partnerships we have now started out kind of rough. Okay, hey, yeah, flip to that next one. Okay, now I know this one's going to look like, whoa, lots of information, but this is one of the most powerful tools we have that we use. And I hope you can see this on the slide. But basically what this is when we decided what our mission strategy was for international partnerships, then down this column on the left over here, what you see, these red terms: healthy team, aligned focus, fruitful kingdom growth, networking. These are the things that we decided were the values we wanted in international partners, okay? Now, from those 12 values, we developed a real simple, straightforward question for each one of them that was designed to be yes or no answer, as objective as possible, not like left up to interpretation, just a straightforward question, okay? And then we would ask these questions of each of our partnerships. So you can see at the top there, I just listed the countries they're in to kind of protect the sensitivity of those ministries. But this represents each of the ministries that we've worked with internationally. So for example, like under healthy team, is there a thriving leadership team in addition to the founder? Yes or no? And so we just go across, we ask that of every one of our partnerships. You can see that they're all yeses, except for one. One is a no, way over to the right. I hope everybody's kind of tracking with that. We would go along and align focus. Is this ministry primarily focused on vulnerable children or DMM, that's disciple making movement stuff. Again, back to the values that we established. It doesn't mean that if they're not, that they're terrible people or bad ministry or anything like that. It just means like it helps us determine whether we are aligned in purpose or not. So as you go down each of these questions, you can see them all the way down to number 12. Is it realistic to expect this partnership to be stronger 5 years from now? Yes or no? And then what we do once we've got this is down at the bottom, you can see how many yeses and how many nos. So for the first India ministry, it's 12 yeses, 0 nos. This one's been sorted already, okay? So we sort the partnerships. And now to the far left, you see the strongest partnerships. 12 yeses, 0 nos. 11 yeses, 1 no. These are our most strategic and most aligned partnerships. As you get over here towards the middle and you start seeing the 8 and 4s or the 7 and 5s, everybody kind of track with that, I hope. Those are the ones where we kind of see like a yellow light, like, okay, hey, there's some caution here. We need a written action plan to move some of these no's to yeses. Because what we find is that the reason for the no might not be their problem. It might be our problem, okay? But we want to change these red no's to yeses. And so as you get farther and farther over, even like this last one, Paraguay, 2 yeses, 10 nos. We've had about 3 years of trying to work on this. We came up with an exit strategy and we gave them a severance package and we ended the partnership at the first of the year. It was just that clear cut to us. It wasn't about personality. It wasn't about who Dave likes and doesn't like. It was our leadership team deciding this. The numbers you see on the far right over there are the number of yeses and nos for each of the 12 questions. And again, that just informs us that like question number 2, there's 10 yeses, there's 12 nos. That might not be their problem. That might be our problem. And we need to own that and try to fix it. So this simple tool right here has proven really effective for us. We use this format for our international partners, for our sent missionaries, and then also for our local partnerships. Now the questions are slightly different, but we use this same format to kind of really try to be as objective as possible about how well we're aligned with the people we're working with. And again, if that makes sense, fantastic. If you're an Excel person, then you know this is good. If you're not, we'd be glad to talk through some of this. But
yeah, the important thing I would think, Dave, this is great because I like spreadsheets, so I get geeked out about this. But the important thing is that it's if some people are looking at this, is that you customize it for your church, that you have 7 values on the left, or instead of 12, or you have 10 or 5, and you have so many mission partners. Whether you guys have 22, your church may have 22 or 12 or 8, and so it's customized, but it gives you something, handlebars that you can grab a hold of how we doing here, and relative to each different partner. So this is huge and revolutionary for church. We're picking up, having a look at where we're at.
The difference between what we call a strategic partnership and a supported partner. And
I'm going to break out here. Someone has asked a question. I just want to make sure.
Yep.
Okay, so the question was, and it's good to ask it now. Then I'm going to go back here. Do the missionaries answer each of these 12 questions? It sounds like you're saying you answer it for them, but why don't you clarify that for us?
Yeah, real quick. That's a good question. I answer these because I'm the one working most closely with these. For our sent missionaries, we have somebody else who would do that. We do that from our side, but we share the results with them for their yes and no. We don't show them every partnership, but we show them theirs. Because again, mutual accountability is like, you have to know what's expected of you. And there has to be conversation, at least the understanding and trust about what we're trying to accomplish. And so, yes.
Yeah, let me interject a question right there. And we do have to watch our time, Dave, because you've given us a ton of good stuff. But I would ask, what do you require from your mission partners as far as annual or some other schedule, as far as reporting on how things are going for them on their field?
Yeah, again, I would say we don't ask for any annual reports. I'm not interested in reading a bunch of reports. We try to make sure that all year long that we're able to stay in touch enough to really kind of have a feel for what's going on. Again, if you're constantly pursuing that trust, And I know some people have more time to do this than others, depending on, your staff size and that kind of thing. But
Mhm.
um, we don't. We work on these things throughout the year. Verizon's got a $20 a month plan where I can call about 40 countries like it's a local call. It's pretty simple nowadays to stay in touch. So, um,
Yeah, I love that.
mhm.
Yeah, just,
Well, let me
yeah.
blast through some of this for you real quick in a couple of minutes here, Tim.
Okay.
Sorry, I was
Yep.
kind of
All right.
afraid of this. I knew that I would come with too much info. Um,
Better than too little. Let's fly here.
go to the next slide there, please. Um,
Let me let's see here. There we go.
all right, pray. This is not a session on prayer, but I hope you all understand the incredible power of prayer and the absolute necessity of it in this.
Mhm.
To the next slide, one of the things we realize is people will not stick with something typically because of obligation, no matter what it is. And they'll do it because of passion. And one of the defining moments in the life of our church was bringing this young family from Poland to stay with us and live as part of our staff for a year. Now, yeah, it took a little resources to make that happen. Church pitched in and helped, but having these amazing folks from Poland with us and moving around the different ministries of our church changed the heart of the church. For the first time, everybody in the church who had all these people who had an excuse why they couldn't go somewhere were loving someone from another place, and it really was a defining moment for our church. So I just wanted to touch that. That's something to really dig into. Okay, networking. This is so important to me. It's my heart. Know who you're in partnership with. Um, so often we have global partners and we know surely who they are, but we don't know the American partners that are in this conglomerate of work. There'll be 5 or 6 or 20 or 50 churches working with that same missionary, and they never talk. And we do this a lot. We want to talk. And here's the short version of that. Um, yeah, flip there. I think is okay. Well, the thing about it that we'll say with the networking is you bring a portion of the resources and you celebrate 100% of the victory. That's the amazing thing about knowing. And so sometimes churches will say, hey, I want to be part of something big globally, but our church can't own the whole thing. It's too intimidating for that. Well, if 5 of us went in on it, we could make it happen. And I think we've had some amazing success stories by talking to other partners and to other churches. Okay, these things are just these were defining decisions. Our missions ministry does not compete with any other ministry in the church. We equip every ministry in the church to have an outreach edge to it. And that was a huge factor in our church. No longer are we fighting for the same volunteers or anything. It's like we're going to already believe that what you're doing is powerful with children or students or whatever, and we're going to add something that's an outreach or a global edge to it. We invest money in communication. We tell stories. We have videos of our global partners leading us in communion, whatever. It's just amazingly powerful to include them in the weekly worship service. We try to do compassion moments. We were doing these weekly, which is like 3 minutes of compassion in action, what that looks like through our church. And it just speaks that this is who we are. And again, this last statement, I just said that this is, if we gather for amazing worship every week and nothing changes and the community is right around us where we live and worship, then what's the point? And it convicts people in the heart, especially in these times we're in right now with so much upheaval and so much polarization. Okay, one last tool I want to just show. This one is so good. If you're not familiar with Catalyst Services, go there, check them out. There's a lady named Ellen Livingood. She runs this thing and she provides amazing missions resources. If you go to their postings and go to the archive, there are almost any topic you want to get information on about missions or how to do it in the church or any of this stuff, it's there. And I faithfully go there and look forward to everything they've got. So check them out too. Okay. And the last thing I just wanted to say this, like, man, we preach this all the time. God has a role for all of us in global missions. Whatever it is, we've all got a role to play in this. And it's not like you can't just say, oh, well, children's ministry is my mission. My family is my mission right now for this season. Oh, no, that's your job, okay? This is your ministry to get outside the walls and to reach those who aren't going to come to our services at 9 and 11, okay? So thanks for your time. I wish I could have gone into a lot more detail with all this stuff, but I know I'm running really tight here. I just put this up. This is part of it. This is my contact info. I'm actually going to be going on a sabbatical in April. But if you were to reach out to my email, somebody would forward it to the right person. Or these other two folks here, Carolyn Kixmiller and Jason Coster, who work with us. Carolyn handles all the global stuff, Jason all the local stuff. They can help you with any question you might have, or provide resources, whatever you'd like. So we're willing to
And
help.
I will include those emails in that automated email that goes out tomorrow, so that they've got it to find in the email that comes up with, along with the link to the PDF.
Thanks for
Well,
the time.
thanks for letting us know all that. It really, I think it sparks a lot of conversation that we need to have among our teams about what are we doing, where are we going, how do we create a set of value statements and strategic thoughts about where we're headed. And so I just want to tell those that are on our webinar tonight, Dave and his team would love to do this with you, but Waypoint would love to do that as well. If we can come alongside you, it's what we do, is come alongside churches and leaders and help them get on mission and stay on mission. And so if we can come alongside and be an advocate to help you work through that chart, for example, and customize it for your church and your values in a missions team retreat or in some other way, we'd love to do that with you. Well, our time is just about up. We hope that you join our next missions webinar, but let me tell you about a couple of other things that are really important for those that are on the call tonight, or the webinar. Waypoint is hosting the International Conference on Missions this November in Richmond. And so we want to invite you to come to Richmond and enjoy that weekend. It's the weekend before Thanksgiving. And last time when we hosted in 2015, there were 6,500 missions interested, kingdom-minded people from churches all around the country, all around the world, really, but particularly from our region, that came to ICOM. And so if you would bring not only yourself, but all the kingdom-minded people in your church, they will have a blast. And so we want to invite you to that. There's also a youth convention as well called SICOM, the Student International Conference on Mission, that have your youth guy bring a ton of kids to be exposed to what God is doing around the world now before they head to college, that they need to see that they might have a place in the world through this 2-day conference that'll be in Richmond just for teens. I do want to tell you about our next webinar. It's not for missions in specific, but it's for you in particular, because it's about how to pastor your pastor. And that's something, a role that Waypoint loves to do, is we feel like we are pastors to a lot of pastors here in our region, but we're trying to equip the church this year, related to how whooped our pastors are after a year of COVID, is how you can become an active pastor to your pastor and his family. And so we're going to have a webinar 1 month from now about how you can do that. And so I want to finally, again, thank our sponsor, Mid-Atlantic Christian University, for allowing us to do our webinars every month. This is our 4-year anniversary. So we have 48 webinars under our belt, and we hope that we see you for a lot more of these webinars. And if you would do us a favor and invite those people in your church that are in the particular ministries that these webinars focus on, whether it's safety and security or children's or missions or prayer teams or elders, if you see the title, if you would invite them to join it, your recommendation will be the best thing that will get them to join one of our webinars. So we hope we see you at a future webinar. Dave, I hope to see you at ICOM in Richmond. If you're not planning on coming, I hope to see you there regardless. But I hope to see all of you that are on the webinar tonight with you and a bunch of people from your church. Have a great night.
Thanks.